for everyone in this room, a warm welcome. I hope to cover in a very brief time, 15 minutes or so, very briefly about the book, its findings, relate a little bit to the Singapore entrepreneurial and business building scene, as far as I could tell, and double-click on one aspect of it. Let me also acknowledge my co-authors. All three of us have business building experiences in both large corporate as well as a traditional venture background. And this is what's unique about the book. It is not about what the great things that Steve Jobs have done, nor the transformation of IBM. All right? It is what is at the confluence of large corporate business building and entrepreneur, as we traditionally have known it. And it is a unique coincidence that Dick Harrington, who was the CEO of Thomson, had transformed an old-line paper company, newspaper company, a family business, to the world's largest digital information company. And he's now the CEO of, chairman of Q-Ball, a PE group, with my other co-author, Tony Chan, a mentee of mine back in the McKinsey days that had been a serial entrepreneur. So we kind of span the entire business building spectrum. Myself, given the passage of time, I could just point out very quickly that I have helped, amongst other people, a SME called Aldo Shoes. So that to the extent that you go to Paragon or somewhere, you see an Aldo Shoe shop, that's my handiwork. When I found them, they were only in Canada. And my job was to convince the entrepreneurial couple, Mr. and Mrs. Aldo Benzedum, to globalize. And the other one was the first brick and click, low-cost banking called President's Choice Financial in Canada. And also, of course, I had the privilege to work on Manulife One, which is still today, 25 years later, a big money spinner in the Manulife financial banking part of the company. So we use business and entrepreneur, business building entrepreneur interchangeably in this talk, and I'm going to switch from he or she and liberally, so that please think about whichever gender you would like. A bit about the book. As I mentioned, it covers both the startups as well as large corporate business building. And the exciting news is that there are a lot more commonality than there are differences. The context is vastly different, and most people couldn't see past the contextual differences and really see the DNA of a business builder that had to break through a bureaucracy versus an entrepreneur startup that has to go back for funding or whatever. And the essential commonality is really boiled down to those four leadership qualities on the cover of the book: heart, smart, guts, and luck. We looked at not just what they did, but also make decisions, how they make decisions, and above all, the propensity and preferences. And therefore, we're going deep into behavior. What motivates these people, and what are the ingredients that make up their decision making and the preponderance of their decisions and actions and behavior. And you're welcome, by the way, to go to hsgl.com. There is an entrepreneurial aptitude test. It now has passed the 175,000 test takers. It is our gift to the world. It is free and without any encumbrances. And all information is definitely confidential and used only for statistical purposes and casual research by people like me. The book is based on 3 years of work of 1,000 entrepreneurs and business builders being surveyed, and 100 in-depth cases, some of which are household names that you know of and use their products. And finally, we look at the business building process, not just at the startup, but also the proving up, scaling up, and for large company particularly, the extension, how to go beyond once you achieve scale. And so here's the short version of the book, to the extent you haven't had time to look at the book. I'm going to concentrate, and so pardon me if I sort of zip past very quickly. First, heart. Heart is about passion. It's about purpose. It's about sacrificial love. Purpose is the answer to the question, why am I here? It is a difference that you're trying to make that is larger than your product, and for that matter, even yourself. Passion is the desire to push, to turn something you see into a reality for a broader audience. Ultimately, one has heart when she cares enough about that dream to set aside all other things to devote herself indefinitely to her dream. In Singapore, many entrepreneurs I met and business builders had often the question from, among others, their parents, when are you going to get a real job? All right? Now, this is the kind of things that they had to put up with in order to pursue their entrepreneurial dream. So, you know when somebody has heart, when they take all these difficulties in stride. Smarts, I'm not going to touch on book smart at all. People in this room are 10 times smarter than I am. But what we found were two things that are really critical about smarts. First, pattern recognition. It is about being able to connect the dots and be able to see things in alternative arena, not just geography. Can be totally in another business and say, if that works for that business and industry, why doesn't it work for this particular one? And hence a business idea. Right? Pattern recognition, it goes well beyond blue ocean. Furthermore, smart is also about judgment, especially people judgment. I've seen thousands of startup ventures and even corporate ones that went nowhere because they had the wrong people in the team. Or sadly, they may start off with the right people, but when it was time to change gear and scale up or extend and go overseas, they stuck with the same team and failed to confront the leadership configuration issue of changing horses. So, pattern recognition and pragmatic judgment. Zipping along, guts. Now, these are the two most important factors, guts and luck. When I started writing this book, people would say to me, you must be kidding. You're either gutsy or not. You're either lucky or you're not. So what is there to say? What is there to research about? Well, guts, as we found, were really three things. Guts to start, guts to persevere, and guts to evolve. And they are critical in different stages of the business building. Guts to start, which by the way is the biggest stumbling block according to the research done by NEC of the National University, and it's a global sample on 93,000 people. It is not that we don't have money, institution that you can turn to for funds. We are well above average on a global basis. But our would-be entrepreneurs' biggest stumbling block, even among those who profess themselves to be seriously thinking about as well as intentional founders, scored the highest, which is negative, in the world for failure to start. Can we improve on guts to start? I'll say more about that in the last part of my remarks. Guts to endure. Think about Nelson Mandela, 27 years as a prisoner, and continue to not give up when everybody else did. That's guts to endure hardships, setbacks, failures, and oppression. Guts to evolve is that when things are going good, not taking the status quo as a given. When it ain't broken, break it anyway and fix it. It's the attitude of this guts to evolve. And many companies that fail to ultimately sustain is because when the business model have failed or beginning to fail to be effective, they have failed to evolve. And it takes courage to really tamper with the wellspring of success as we know it. Quick word about luck. What's about luck? Luck is about attitude and network. Rather surprising as we found. There's no question, I give you example after examples of people that were seen to be lucky, but very few people bothered. They gave up and said, oh, he's just more lucky than I am. Bothered to really examine and analyze those cases and really dig into what made those people lucky. It boiled down to the attitude factors as follows. First, humility. Humility. It's a self-awareness that I may not know about this, but somebody else out there may. Optimism. Lucky people tend to think of everything that could go right, as opposed to all of us who are trained to figure out everything that could go wrong. They tend to know people whom they think will help. They have more people in the Rolodex that they know of that can help them in specific things, right, compared to others. And when faced with uncertain and unfamiliar, like the times where we're finding ourselves right now, these people remain positive that somehow things will always work out for the better. Optimism. Finally, surprisingly, network. Spending time with people that are unlike me. I don't have to tell you, right? You are getting together with your corporate tables, you're with your friends, weekend you hang out with them, whether it's alumni association or same schools and same companies. But how many of us actually spend time with people that are unlike us, but interesting in terms of what they do and the qualities they have, and willing to make ourselves vulnerable, generous, open, and authentic? All right, guts. Let me double down that quickly and share with you what we found that's not inside the book, the Beyond 6 questions for those of you who find that, like many Singaporeans who would like to start businesses, stumbled on this question of failure to start. The survey, by the way, is 86 pages of guests. Global University Entrepreneurial Spirit Student Survey, 93,000, perhaps the most statistically valid study that I really poured over it with great relish. Rather than that, I'm going to just draw on statistics as we go along. Some questions to ask yourself regarding guts. The first question is, what terrifies you? What scares you? Gutsy people are not fearless, contrary to belief, as we go through in-depth interview. They have the ability to turn negative energy of fear into positive energy of action. Now, so in other words, this adage, when in doubt, do something. All right? And as a strategist, one of the things I've learned in the 90s was that sometimes movement creates new insight and opportunity of a stalemate. Number 2, ask yourself the question, what is the worst that can happen? What is the worst that can happen? For the young people, I don't understand this. Only 1% of the students in Singapore that have been surveyed that wanted to be entrepreneurs actually start. 2.5 times less than the global average. So what have you got to lose? Young people, you can start again. The best time to make mistake is in fact when you are young, because you can always learn from it. For the older people, I always remember the vivid memory of Paul Reichman of the Canary Wharf. How many of you marveled at the big, giant financial center called Canary Wharf? When we were questioning him on the very, very mediocre IRR for the project, and look at all the risks that he's facing. He got up, handed out papers to all of us around the table, myself included, and said, write down a number. How much money you think, if you socked away, you can live in the style that you want for the rest of your life. Write down that number. After we wrote down that number and say, suppose you take that number and lock it away, how would you approach the same decision differently? In other words, set that number aside and roll the dice. Your risk, you see, it is like the progressive tax rate, all right? You don't apply the marginal tax rate on the entire income. If you lock away that base income or base savings, and you say, how would my risk appetite be for the rest of the money beyond that number? I was blown away. I was blown away. For that reason, and I credit Paul Reichman, I scored highest on guts. I'm a guts dominant person. As I get older, I think I'm dumber, but I'm more gutsier. All right, third question. Are you truly and madly in love with the business you are trying to build or the change you are trying to make happen? If you are not, Maybe that's why you're not gutsy. Heart and guts are correlated. Comparing the Singaporean intentional founders with the global samples, the biggest gaps with the global samples rests in the area of not having done anything to initiate, not having thought about a first business idea, and way below average in discussing it with potential customers. Things that require guts to just get out there, do something, talk to 2 customers. Would you buy this product? How much would you pay for it if it is put in front of you? Just talk. I was aghast at an environment in which the same respondents rated well above average in terms of climate, favorable climate for starting businesses, ample funding from institutions and private investors alike. Our track record for starting businesses are way below, as the survey had indicated. 4th question, which risks are you better positioned to take? Now, I think we have a lot of stuff going on that talks about risk as a risk management means risk reduction. And I don't want to hit that. That's very important things to do, especially for people who have to be responsible for fiduciary responsibility that is discharged. But the problem fundamentally is that people don't understand that you have to take risks sometime. There are 2 kinds of gutsy people. One who are high in tolerating risk for long periods of time. Ambiguity, uncertainty, they can put up with it when the rest gave up. The other kinds, occasionally they will step up and take a risk that nobody would. Why is that? As it turned out in the research, these people are not stupid or just fearless or reckless. They have figured out that those are the risks that are uniquely well positioned to take, and they shed systematically all the other risks that they are not. So have you, to the extent that we can put our problem-solving and analytical mind to work, have you look at risk that way and really take those that you can take? Finally, how can I experience and learn from crisis? Now, when it comes to crisis and management and so on, most people think about it as a thinking exercise, right? We all know about contingency planning. We got reams of it. Let's say, okay, if X happens, we do this. If Y happens, we do that. And here's the process, the protocol, the who to call, etc. That's all wonderful. But let me tell you something, crisis management is experiential. It's not a thinking exercise. The best way to get your guts up is to experience crisis, setbacks, oppression, and failure. And in my 30 years of career with McKinsey, I certainly had more than my share of that. All right, so I think it is very important to understand that crisis management is about experiencing, less about thinking. Final question, how would you team up to complement your leadership qualities? If you take that profile survey, you would be able to see that none of us are going to be dominant in all factors as much as we wish. And in fact, none of the successful entrepreneurs, business builders that we have surveyed, including Sergey Brin, including Jeff Bezos and so on, are different from the profiles you get in terms of being dominant in one, perhaps the most 2 of those factors. The important thing is that they team up. They team up with people that are complementing them. Now, the good news is that Singaporeans in the survey are more likely to team up with others. However, the question is this, who do you know in your network that you can team up that actually will complement your leadership qualities, as opposed to, oh, she's my good buddy, maybe we should start a business together. That's lovely. Now, I would do that for a golf buddy. I would go do that for an afternoon trip to the movie theater. But I would not do that necessarily for starting business. So start networking with people that are unlike you, but are interesting. Okay, let me sum up. I started off the book in wanting to sort of look into an area that's been puzzling me for a long time, which is that why is entrepreneurship only in the domain of the Silicon Valley ventures and IT world and so on? Why isn't it relevant to all my large corporate clients and so on? And to my delight and my co-authors' delight, we found 4 leadership qualities, heart, smart, guts, and luck, that are equally important right? And are more common between them, between stages and stages, different stages of business building than they are different. It is clouded over by the contextual differences that I have mentioned before. Second is that, again, if there is any value in the book, it is to encourage everybody who is in this room and beyond, out there who's reading the book, that hard and smart we understand, but guts and luck indeed is something that we can influence, if not directly improve over time. And I wish you all the best in your endeavors.